Where did you get that? The old woman's voice, a rusty hinge in the hushed restaurant, cut right through the deal Marcus was trying to close. The waitress, bless her clueless heart, just stammered. A gift from her mother. Right. Like that necklace wasn't legendary, wasn't buried with Eleanor Vance's daughter decades ago. Marcus's eyes flickered. Not sympathy, not concern, panic. See, he knew Isabella wasn't dead. He knew that emerald clasp, shaped like a songbird, wasn't some cheap imitation. He'd made damn sure of it. He just didn't realize this girl, this nobody, was the loose thread that would unravel everything. And Eleanor? They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. Where did you get that? The old woman's voice, a rusty hinge in the hushed restaurant, cut right through the deal Marcus was trying to close. The waitress, bless her clueless heart, just stammered. A gift from her mother. Right. Like that necklace wasn't legendary, wasn't buried with Eleanor Vance's daughter decades ago. Marcus's eyes flickered. Not sympathy, not concern, panic. See, he knew Isabella wasn't dead. He knew that emerald clasp, shaped like a songbird, wasn't some cheap imitation. He'd made damn sure of it. He just didn't realize this girl, this nobody, was the loose thread that would unravel everything. And Eleanor? They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. Aurelia, with its hushed reverence and exorbitant prices, was Eleanor Vance's usual Tuesday night haunt. Not by choice exactly. It was a gilded cage, a familiar backdrop to the endless cycle of board meetings, charity galas, and the suffocating expectation that came with being Eleanor Vance, matriarch of a billion-dollar empire. She'd seen it all, done it all, owned most of it. Still, even at 82, her eyes, sharp and discerning, missed nothing. Tonight, something caught her attention. Not a glittering diamond or a polished surface, but a glint of light across the crowded room. A ghost of a memory made real. A young waitress, barely more than a girl, wore it. Around her slender neck hung the necklace Eleanor had believed lost for half a century, buried with her heart, her soul, her wedding necklace. The whispers of power and privilege swirled around her table. Opposite Eleanor sat Julian, her grandson and heir, all sharp angles and inherited confidence. At 28, he was the embodiment of Vance wealth, tailored suits, and a perpetually bored expression. To his right, Marcus Vance, her late husband Richard's younger brother, plastered on his practiced charm. Marcus, COO of Vance Industries and Eleanor's steadfast rock since Richard's tragic death. Or so she'd believed. The Henderson deal closes Friday, Marcus was saying, his voice a smooth, reassuring baritone. Julian navigated the final hurdles brilliantly. Eleanor nodded, only half listening. She knew this dinner was meant to celebrate Julian's latest victory, a significant coup in the corporate world. But tonight, September 4th, held a far more profound meaning. It would have been Richard's 85th birthday. A familiar ache pulsed in her chest, a hollow space that no amount of success could ever fill. "Grandmother, are you all right?" Julian asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "Perfectly fine, dear," she replied, her voice retaining its usual steely edge, though her gaze drifted towards the young waitress approaching their table. The girl, her name tag read Mia, carried a water pitcher and a tentative smile. But Eleanor's gaze bypassed the professional facade, locking onto the object nestled in the hollow of her throat. Impossible. It couldn't be. Richard had commissioned it from a Florentine artisan just before their wedding. Not some vulgar display of wealth, but a deeply personal symbol of their love. A single, flawless emerald, the color of a spring forest, cradled in a platinum setting of intertwined willow branches. And the clasp, the most distinctive detail, a tiny, exquisitely sculpted nightingale. My songbird, Richard had called her. Engraved on the back, hidden from view, were the words, "En mon chant, mon cœur." My song, my heart. Eleanor's breath hitched. The blood drained from her face, leaving her pale as death. For 50 years, she had carried the crushing weight of grief, believing that necklace lost forever with the greatest tragedy of her life, the assumed death of her beloved daughter, Isabella. A daughter who loved her so much. The question, a rusty dagger, pierced the restaurant's decorum. Where did you get that? The room seemed to hold its breath, the clinking of silverware fading into an oppressive silence. Marcus and Julian stopped mid-sentence, turning to her with startled expressions. Mia, startled, froze mid-pour. Ma'am? Eleanor raised a trembling hand, her finger pointing accusingly at the emerald. The necklace. Where did you get it? Mia's fingers instinctively touched the cool stone, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. This? It was my mother's. It's all I have left of her. Julian scoffed, a dismissive curl of his lip. Grandmother, please. It's probably a replica, a cheap knockoff. It is not a knockoff, Eleanor snapped, her voice regaining its power, laced with an icy fury that made both men flinch. She knew that artisan had destroyed the mold. She stared at the waitress, her mind reeling, searching for answers. A thief? A con artist? Or something far more disturbing? Young woman, she commanded, her voice leaving no room for argument. You will come with us now. Every eye in the restaurant turned, drawn by the spectacle. Mr. Dubois, the portly manager, hurried over, his face a mask of professional concern. Mrs. Vance, is there a problem? There is a grave problem, Eleanor said, her eyes never leaving Mia's terrified face. This employee is in possession of stolen property of immense personal value. I want to speak with her in private. Mia looked around wildly, her face flushed with humiliation and fear. Stolen? No, you don't understand. My mother gave this to me before she passed away. I would never steal anything. We will see about that, Eleanor said, her tone glacial. She gestured to her personal security, two discreet men in dark suits who seemed to materialize from the shadows. Take her to my private suite upstairs, gently, and do not let her out of your sight. As the guards moved in, Mia looked desperately towards Julian and Marcus. Julian averted his gaze, embarrassed by the public display. But Marcus's expression was unreadable. For a fleeting second, as his eyes met Mia's, there was a flicker of something beyond sympathy or curiosity. A cold, calculated alarm that vanished as quickly as it appeared. For Eleanor, the world had tilted on its axis. The necklace wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was the key to a locked room in her heart, a room filled with grief, regret, and the ghost of her only child, Isabella. A daughter she had been told was dead for 30 years. And in the calculated gaze of Marcus Vance, she had to wonder, what had he done? What was he hiding? The private dining suite on the top floor of Aurelia was in stark contrast to the bustling restaurant below. It was a silent, opulent chamber with panoramic views of the glittering Manhattan skyline. Companies were dismantled and careers were ended. Today, it would be the stage for the destruction of a legacy built on lies. Marcus Vance entered the boardroom, a self-satisfied smile on his face. He assumed Eleanor had called an emergency meeting to discuss the waitress situation, and he had prepared a strategy to have Mia Russo quietly and legally dealt with, painting her as a clever fraud. He was surprised to find only 3 people waiting for him. Elena, sitting at the head of the table, her posture as rigid as a queen on her throne. Julian standing by the companies were dismantled and careers were ended. Today it would be the stage for the destruction of a legacy built on lies. Marcus Vance entered the boardroom, a self-satisfied smile on his face. He assumed Eleanor had called an emergency meeting to discuss the waitress situation, and he had prepared a strategy to have Mia Russo quietly and legally dealt with, painting her as a clever fraud. He was surprised to find only 3 people waiting for him. Elena, sitting at the head of the table, her posture as rigid as a queen on her throne. Julian standing by the window, his expression uncharacteristically grim, and a man in a simple suit he didn't recognize, who stood silently by Elena's side. Eleanor, what's all this? Marcus began, his tone light. A bit dramatic for a Tuesday morning, isn't it? If this is about that girl, I assure you I have it handled. Sit down, Marcus, Elena said. Her voice was quiet, but it echoed in the cavernous room with chilling authority. Marcus's smile faltered. He took a seat opposite her, a flicker of unease in his eyes. This is David Chen, Elena said, gesturing to the man beside her. He is a private investigator. The color drained from Marcus's face. A private investigator? For what possible reason? For the truth, Elena replied. She slid a file across the polished table. It stopped directly in front of Marcus. Let's start with this. A transaction record from 29 years ago, the dissolution of Isabella's trust fund. You told me the money went to a marine biology foundation in her memory, but it seems it went into a holding account and then into your pocket. Marcus stared at the paper, his mind racing. That's a misunderstanding. There were complications, fees. I intended to make the donation, but the legalities were complex. Were they? Julian spoke for the first time, his voice laced with contempt. He stepped forward and placed the bundle of his aunt's letters on the table. Were these letters also a complication? The ones Isabella wrote to her grandmother, begging for forgiveness? The ones you intercepted and hid for 30 years? Marcus looked at the faded envelopes, and for the first time raw panic flashed in his eyes. Where did you get those? This is an invasion of privacy. Privacy? Those are family matters. They are my family matters. Elena corrected her voice, rising with controlled fury. And you kept my daughter's words from me while you fed me lies about her rebellion and her descent into recklessness. I was protecting you, Elena, Marcus blustered, his voice growing louder, more desperate. She was out of control. She was throwing her life away on some penniless artist. I did what I had to do to protect the Vance name, to protect Richard's legacy, protect his legacy. Elena's voice was a low growl. You destroyed it. David Chen stepped forward and placed a small digital recorder on the table. He pressed play. The crackling voice of an old man filled the silent room. His name was Vance, a fancy man from the city. He gave me 10 grand in cash, said all I had to do was sign a paper saying I saw a boat go down in the storm. Never saw no boat, never saw no girl. It was a lie, but I needed the money. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by Marcus's ragged breathing. His mask of charm and control had shattered, revealing the craven, jealous man beneath. He was cornered, exposed, with nowhere left to run. You let me mourn my daughter for 30 years. Elena whispered the pain of a lifetime in her voice. You let me build a memorial to a ghost you created. You stood by my side at her empty grave, a comforting hand on my shoulder while you knew she was alive, struggling alone. You let her die sick and poor just a few miles from here. All for this? She swept her hand around the opulent boardroom for money, for control. Because you could never measure up to your brother. Could you, Richard? Built this empire. You could only steal it. Marcus slumped in his chair, defeated. The fight was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. He stared at his hands on the mahogany table, the hands that had signed the false reports, hidden the letters, and stolen a family's future. I did it for the family, he mumbled a pathetic, broken refrain. You are not family, Julian snarled, his face a mask of disgust. Not anymore. Elena stood up her full height, seeming to fill the room. Her grief was a tangible force, but it was now forged into a weapon of cold, hard justice. Security is on their way, Marcus, she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. They will escort you from this building. Your assets are frozen. Your name will be stripped from every Vance holding. You will be publicly and legally disowned. You took my daughter from me. Today I am taking everything from you. Now get out of my sight. As the security team arrived and led a pale, speechless Marcus Vance from the room, Elena finally allowed her composure to break. She sank into her chair, the strength leaving her legs, and buried her face in her hands. The truth was out, but the devastation it left in its wake was immeasurable. She had not found her daughter. She had only found the truth of how she had lost her, and it was a betrayal more painful than death itself. The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of legal action and quiet sorrow. The story of Marcus Vance's decades-long deception sent shock waves through the elite circles of New York society. He became a pariah overnight, his name synonymous with the ultimate betrayal. For Eleanor, however, the public victory was a hollow one. Each legal document severing ties with Marcus was another reminder of the 30 years she had lost. Her focus now was singular Mia. She had sent a car for her, not as a summons, but as a gentle invitation. Mia arrived at the Grand Fifth Avenue penthouse, the same place she had been brought under suspicion. But this time she was greeted not by security guards, but by Elena Vance herself, her eyes filled with a profound, aching sadness. "Mia," Elena began, her voice thick with emotion. "There is so much I have to tell you, so much I have to apologize for." Over the next few hours, in the quiet solitude of the penthouse study, Elena laid out the entire tragic story. She showed Mia the letters her mother had written, the proof of Marcus's deceit, the depth of the betrayal that had shaped both of their lives without them even knowing. She spoke of her daughter, Isabella Vance, not as a rebellious runaway, but as a vibrant, loving young woman who had fallen in love and been punished for it by a cruel, ambitious man. Mia listened, her hands clasped in her lap, tears streaming down her face. She was not just crying for the mother she had lost, but for the grandmother she never knew she had, and for the life of struggle her mother had endured when a life of love and family had been stolen from her. The necklace around her neck was no longer just a memento. It was a testament to her mother's hidden legacy, a link to a world she could never have imagined. "She thought you hated her," Mia whispered, her heart breaking for her mother's pain. All those years she thought her own mother had cast her out and wanted nothing to do with her. Uncle Marcus, he visited her once, right after she ran away. He gave her some money and told her you never wanted to see her again. He told her you said she was dead to you. The final cruel twist of the knife. Elena closed her eyes, absorbing the agony of it. Marcus hadn't just lied to her. He had poisoned her daughter's heart against her, ensuring Isabella would never reach out, never try to break through the wall of silence he had built. "He was wrong," Elena said, her voice a fierce whisper. "I never stopped loving her, not for a single day." She reached across the table and took Mia's hands in her own frail, trembling ones. "Her name was Isabella Vance. Your name, if you will have it, is Amelia Vance Russo. You are my granddaughter. You are the last piece of my daughter, the last piece of my Richard, this home, this family. It is yours. It has always been waiting for you." The transition was not immediate or easy. Mia was thrust into a world of incomprehensible wealth and scrutiny. Eleanor announced her existence to the world at a press conference that stunned the financial and social communities. She wasn't presented as a long-lost heir in a fairy tale, but as the victim of a monstrous crime, a symbol of the family's resilience and commitment to truth. Julian, stripped of his arrogance and humbled by the truth, became Mia's staunchest ally. He helped her navigate the complexities of her new life, not as a condescending blue blood, but as a cousin, a friend bound by a shared, painful history. He saw in Mia the integrity and kindness that had been so lacking in the corporate world he'd been groomed for. Mayor, in turn, never lost sight of who she was. She was Amelia Russo, the daughter of a librarian from Queens. While she accepted her place as a Vance, she insisted on honoring her mother's life. She didn't want a position at Vance Industries. Instead, with Elena's full and tearful blessing, she used her newfound resources to establish the Isabella Russo Foundation, a charity dedicated to providing support, housing, and educational grants for single mothers and their children. She took the quiet dignity of her mother's struggle and transformed it into a legacy of hope for thousands. She never moved into the grand penthouse. Instead, she found a comfortable brownstone in Brooklyn, a place that felt more like a home. But she visited her grandmother every day, bridging the 30-year gap with shared stories, old photographs, and quiet moments of understanding, slowly healing a wound that had festered for a generation. The silence that fell in the wake of Marcus Vance's ruin was not a peaceful one. It was a hollow and echoing void filled with the ghosts of 30 lost years. For Elena, the immediate aftermath of the boardroom confrontation was not one of triumph, but of profound collapse. The cold fury that had sustained her through the discovery and the accusation receded, leaving behind an ocean of grief, so vast it threatened to drown her. She had won. She had exposed the viper in her nest, but victory felt indistinguishable from desolation. Her daughter was still gone, and the truth of her life and death was a tragedy far crueler than the lie she had mourned for 3 decades. Her first real conversation with Mia, away from the sterile environment of offices and the threat of confrontation, was achingly awkward. It took place in the grand penthouse library, a room lined with thousands of leather-bound books that suddenly felt like a morale of forgotten knowledge. Mia sat on the edge of a damask sofa, looking small and overwhelmed, still dressed in the simple clothes of her former life. She clutched a lukewarm cup of tea, her knuckles white. Elena sat opposite her, a chasm of mahogany and Persian rug between them, unsure of how to bridge a gap forged by a lifetime of deception. "I have your mother's old rooms," Elena began, her voice fragile, stripped of its usual authority. "They've been preserved, untouched, I suppose I always thought." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. That I could go in there and pretend she was just away at school, that keeping it a shrine would somehow keep her alive. Mia looked up, her eyes reddened and filled with a pain that mirrored Elena's own. "Can I see them?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Together, they walked down a long, silent corridor to the east wing. Eleanor used a heavy, ornate key to unlock a door she hadn't opened in years. The air that greeted them was still and thick with the scent of dried papyri and old paper. Isabella's teenage bedroom was a perfect time capsule from the late 20th century, a collection of vinyl records. Bowie the Smiths. Kate Bush sat beside a dusty turntable. Poetry books by Plaw and Dickinson were stacked on a nightstand. A corkboard on the wall was a collage of faded photographs. A smiling girl with her arms around her father Richard, the same girl on horseback, a candid shot of her laughing with friends, her face a constellation of youthful joy. Mia walked slowly into the room, her fingertips grazing the edge of a wooden desk. She saw a life her mother had never once spoken of. This vibrant, privileged, happy girl felt like a stranger. The Isabella she knew was quiet, melancholic, a woman who found her solace in the hushed aisles of the library, who seemed to carry the weight of the world on her slender shoulders. "She was so alive," Mia whispered, picking up a silver-backed hairbrush from the vanity. "She was the brightest light in every room," Elena said, a tear finally tracing a path down her wrinkled cheek. "Before her father died, she was everything. Afterwards, a part of that light went out. Marcus convinced me her rebellion, her falling for Leo, was a symptom of her grief, a way of lashing out. He twisted her love into a weapon against her." Mia turned, her expression a mixture of sorrow and a flicker of anger. "She loved my father and she loved you. In the box, the one I showed Julian, there were journals. She wrote about you all the time, how she missed your conversations, how she hoped one day you would meet Leo and see the man she saw." Mia's voice broke. "She spent her whole life believing you had rejected that love, that you had rejected her." The accusation, though gentle, struck Elena with the force of a physical blow. It was her deepest fear laid bare, that her pride and her reliance on Marcus had made her complicit. "I failed her, Amelia." Eleanor confessed the formal use of her full name, a plea for a connection she felt she hadn't earned. "A mother is supposed to protect her child. I was so lost in my own sorrow, I let a monster guard the gates. Can you ever forgive me for that?" Mia looked at the heartbroken old woman before her, a titan of industry reduced to a grieving mother, and saw not a figure of power, but a fellow victim. "There is nothing to forgive," Mia said, her own tears flowing freely now. "He lied to both of us. We both lost her." In that shared moment of grief in the dusty, silent room of a ghost, the first fragile thread of a bond was woven between them. It wasn't the joyful reunion of a fairy tale, but something more real, more profound, a partnership in mourning and in memory. The days that followed were a chaotic blur. The story exploded in the media, and Mia's life was irrevocably altered. Paparazzi camped outside her Queens apartment building, turning her humble home into a prison. Her friends from the diner, especially her closest confidant, Chloe, were supportive. But a new distance was there. They looked at her differently, as if she were now a creature from another planet. Some acquaintances came out of the woodwork, asking for money, for introductions, for a piece of the fantasy. Her old life was being dismantled brick by brick. Eleanor, in her grief, reverted to her old ways of solving problems with money. She had her real estate agents purchase a lavish duplex on Park Avenue for Mia, fully furnished and staffed. But when Mia saw it, she gently refused. I can't, she explained to a confused Elena. This isn't me. It feels like I'd be stepping into a costume. Instead, she asked for something far more valuable: time. Julian became the indispensable bridge between these two worlds. Humbled and stripped of his former arrogance, he found a new purpose. He shielded Mia from the worst of the media storm, handled the sycophants with a cool efficiency, and patiently explained the labyrinthine complexities of the Vance family holdings. He would take her for coffee, not at Aurelia, but at a small anonymous cafe in Greenwich Village, where they could talk. It's all right to be angry, he told her one afternoon after she'd confessed to feeling overwhelmed and lost. You have every right to be. You can be angry at Marcus, at the world, even at grandmother. She'd understand. I'm not angry at her, Mia said, stirring her latte. I'm just sad. I feel like I'm grieving my mom all over again. But this time I'm grieving the life she should have had. One crisp morning, Mia did something she had to do alone. She took the train to the cemetery where her mother was buried under a simple headstone. Isabella Russo, beloved mother. She sat on the grass, the Serafina locket, cool against her skin, and told her mother everything. Hi, Mom. She began, her voice thick. You're not going to believe this. That story you told me about Dad being a prince, it was kind of true. You were the princess. Your name was Isabella Vance. And your mother, my grandmother, she didn't cast you out. She loved you. She loves you still. A bad man lied to everyone, Mom. He stole your life from you. But I'm going to make sure the world knows your real story. The story of Isabella Vance Russo. I promise. That promise became her anchor. She didn't want the power or the prestige of the Vance name for herself. She wanted to use it to give her mother the legacy she was denied. The idea for the Isabella Russo Foundation was born not in a boardroom, but on the quiet, sun-dappled grass of a cemetery. When she presented the idea to Elena and Julian, a foundation to provide comprehensive support for single mothers and their children. Elena wept. It was the perfect tribute, a way to transform Isabella's quiet struggle into a powerful force for good. Elena, for her part, undertook her own pilgrimage. She had her driver take her to the address in Queens. She walked up the 3 flights of stairs to the apartment where her daughter had lived and died. Mia had given her a key, and for an hour, Elena sat alone in the small lavender-scented living room. She saw the worn armchair where her daughter must have read to Mia, the second-hand books, the small kitchen where she cooked humble meals. It was a life of profound lack, materially speaking. But it was also clearly a life filled with a deep and abiding love between a mother and a child. For Elena, sitting there amidst the ghosts of her daughter's quiet life, the true cost of Marcus' betrayal became agonizingly clear. It wasn't about the lost inheritance, it was about the lost moments, the birthdays, the scraped knees, the bedtime stories, the shared laughter. It was a theft of time itself. The launch of the Isabella Russo Foundation was a major event held at the New York Public Library, a place that honored Mia's mother. Mia, standing at the podium in a simple, elegant dress, was no longer the timid waitress. She was a woman who had found her voice. She spoke not of the Vance fortune or the scandal, but of her mother, the librarian from Queens, who taught her that the greatest wealth was found in kindness and in books. She told the story of a single mother's quiet dignity, her fierce love, and her uncomplaining strength. Watching from the front row, Eleanor felt a surge of pride so immense it took her breath away. This was her granddaughter. This was Isabella's daughter. She was everything Richard would have dreamed of. Strong, compassionate, and wise, with a heart that valued people over profit. Julian sat beside her, his gaze fixed on his cousin, his admiration clear. The Vance family, once a cold dynasty of 2, was becoming a warm and resilient unit of 3. A few weeks later, on a golden autumn afternoon, Elena took Mia and Julian to the family estate in Connecticut. It was the first time Mia had seen the place her mother had loved so dearly. They walked through the gardens, the air crisp and smelling of wood smoke and damp earth. They came to a bench overlooking a bed of Richard's favorite white roses. This was her spot, Elena said, her voice soft with memory. She'd sit here for hours with a book. As they sat, Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out the small velvet box. She opened it to reveal the Serafina locket gleaming as if lit from within. "When your grandfather gave this to me," Elena began, her voice steady, now filled with the strength of her newfound peace. "He told me it was a map of his heart, the emerald for our future, the branches for our bond, and the nightingale for the song you put in me. When I gave it to your mother, I told her she was that song continuing. I know she believed that song had been silenced. She was wrong." Elena lifted the necklace from the box. "Marcus's evil stole so much. It stole your mother from my life and me from hers. It stole your childhood from this family. But it could not steal the love that is this necklace's true legacy. Your mother protected it. She passed it to you, my dear Amelia. You brought it home. You brought our family home." Mia's eyes filled with tears as Elena fastened the familiar weight around her neck. It felt different now, not a relic of a mysterious past, but the key to her future. It was a promise fulfilled. "It is not an inheritance of wealth," Eleanor continued, taking Mia's hand. "It is an inheritance of heart. Your mother's, your grandfather's, and mine. Your father was an artist and your mother was a librarian. You come from creators and storytellers. This family's future, its new legacy, will not be written in stock ledgers or boardrooms. It will be written in the lives you change with your mother's foundation. It will be a legacy of kindness." Mia looked from her grandmother to her cousin, their faces softened by the afternoon light, and she finally felt a sense of peace settle in her soul. She was not the lost Russo girl or the surprising Van Serre. She was the woman who stood between two worlds and had chosen to build a bridge. The song in her heart, once a quiet, lonely melody, was now part of a symphony. Here in the quiet of the garden, surrounded by a love that had conquered the darkest of betrayals, the nightingale's heart was finally and truly ready to sing again. An incredible story of loss, betrayal, and the unbreakable bonds of family. A single necklace, a ghost from the past, unraveled a web of lies that had been spun for 30 years. It shows us that truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of coming to the surface. Eleanor Vance lost a daughter, but found a granddaughter, and in doing so, she reclaimed her family's stolen legacy. Mia Russo went from serving the wealthy to empowering the vulnerable, proving that our circumstances don't have to define our character. What do you think is the most shocking part of Marcus's betrayal? The faked death, the stolen letters, or the lifetime of lies he told to the woman who trusted him most? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like and share it with someone who loves a powerful story of justice and redemption. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another incredible true life story from our channel. Thank you for listening.